Part 1. The Voyage into the Unknown. Imagine marching into enemy captivity with a heart full of fear only to be swept into a world of unimaginable wonder and secret dread. What would your captor's world reveal? Prepare for a journey that shattered everything German soldiers believed and planted seeds for a new tomorrow. The year is 1943. The grim dust of North Africa still clings to the boots of the once unbeatable Afrika Korps, Germany's pride. Generals, officers, and foot soldiers stand lined up in ragged formations beneath the pitiless Mediterranean sun, surrendered. The air buzzes with anxious murmurs, whispers of fate worse than death. How will the Americans treat us? Starvation? Torture? Revenge? Many try not to think on it, recounting instead the words of Nazi propaganda that painted America as soft, decadent, hopelessly divided. Most expect the worst. Among them stands Obergefreiter Hans Müller, 27, his uniform sun-bleached, medals dulled by sand. He presses a letter from his sweetheart in Munich to his chest and tries to steady his nerves. Nearby, Captain Friedrich Radke, older, a farmer's son from outside Bremen, clenches his fist, thinking of his wife and children. He wonders, will I ever see them again? Within days, both men are swept up in the largest transfer of prisoners in modern warfare, herded unceremoniously onto ships with thousands of their compatriots. The journey across the Atlantic is terrifying, not because of squalor or mistreatment, but because of the unknown. Müller, squeezed into a Liberty ship's hold with 1,500 others, expects dark misery. Instead, he gets his first surprise: decent bunks, enough food, even cigarettes. A jarring clash with the starving columns he had seen in newsreels as Soviet prisoners stumble through Berlin. As the convoy steams westward, American guards, often barely a few years older than the captives, show almost casual kindness. One, a Texan named Bill, gives Radke a Hershey's bar. It is the first chocolate he's tasted in 3 years. The ship itself is a marvel. "Did you hear?" whispers Dieter, a young mechanic from Dresden. "They built this whole ship in days. They make 3 a day. Impossible." Hans scoffs, but can't shake the sight of brand-new rivets, the smell of fresh paint, the rumble of well-oiled engines, all proof that these ships are not old, repurposed hulks, but technological triumphs. On deck, Müller and Radke steal glimpses of the U.S. Navy vessels escorting the convoy. They bristle with anti-aircraft guns and are resupplied at sea with clockwork efficiency. The Americans seem to have fuel, food, and ammunition for eternity. Radke remembers rationing, blackout curtains, air raid sirens back home, and wonders, if this is only their navy, what do their cities look like? After weeks at sea, the Liberty ships approach the U.S. coast. The first sight is Norfolk Naval Base, a titanic hive of cranes, warehouses, ships lining up as far as the eye can see. The Germans are dumbfounded. Where they expect haunted ruins, they find bustling docks, workers swarming everywhere, trucks humming back and forth. Tall electric light posts stand like sentinels, illuminating the scene even at night. A blasphemy to men used to blackout darkness. Hans Müller tries to keep count. 40 ships? No, 50, he mutters. And more coming. It is simply unthinkable. The camp at Oran managed to feed 5,000 with difficulty. Here, a mess hall can serve 10,000 men at a sitting. Then comes the shock of the railroads. No creaking cattle wagons, but sleek, padded Pullman carriages. Prisoners are loaded into these mobile hotels, as Radke calls them, blinking at the glass windows, upholstered seats, overhead lights. They watch as conductors, more polite than some Reich officers, check tickets and smile. The cars have air conditioning. Coffee is served. Is this a prison train? Or a vacation trip? Someone jokes, and laughter almost hysterical breaks out. The train barrels west through city after city, each one ablaze with light. Every small town, it seems, has more electricity than all of Hamburg. At a refueling stop, Hans notices the rail yard bristling with locomotives and freight cars. A single freight yard, Americans boast, can process more goods in a night than whole German regions could muster in a week. Across the heartland, the evidence mounts. Endless columns of trucks on immaculate highways. Gas stations open at midnight for anyone. Automobiles parked 6 to a suburban home, not just for party officials. In the fields beyond, farm machinery rarely seen outside propaganda posters works the land in effortless rhythms. How do they have so much fuel, so much metal, so much to spare? Some POWs, trained engineers and mechanics, realize that all their supposed technological superiority pales beside this abundance. Radke meets a guard in Nebraska, a farmer's son like himself, who speaks a few words of German. In halting English, Radke asks about the tractors. The guard laughs and says, "That's just our old stuff. Next year, we'll buy new." The casual way he speaks, as if endless renewal is his birthright, leaves Radke speechless. His entire village in Germany shares 2 battered tractors, both scheduled for total war conscription. As the train crosses the Midwest, the prisoners spot factories. Ford's Willow Run, they're told, cranks out a B-24 bomber every 1 hour. A single plant, larger than most German cities, filled with women and men who look well-fed, confident, even joyous. At another stop, children eat oranges and throw away the peels, a scandalous waste to men raised on wartime scarcities. At last, the train pulls into Camp Hearn, Texas. The camp is surrounded by barbed wire and watchtowers, but its barracks are more solid than swathes of German civilian housing. Inside, electric lights, running water, flush toilets, hot showers. The kitchen smells of bread, meat, and cakes. POWs are issued uniforms, American Army surplus, sturdy and new. The camp hospital has real medicines, not the makeshift bandages and watered-down disinfectants they have known. Radke, always skeptical, is forced to admit, this, whatever it is not enemy hell. A feeling of confusion ripples through the prisoners. They meet Swiss Red Cross observers who check menus and living conditions. The answer is always the same. America can afford to keep her enemies alive and well, even while sending armies overseas. One stormy night, Hans stands by the wire, staring out at the prairie. The sky is pierced by distant oil well flames, burning surplus gas. They have so much, they burn it for light and heat, he thinks, awe shading into fear and envy. How could any army, any ideology, hope to overcome this power? What the prisoners feel, beneath the shock and confusion, is a gnawing suspense. If America can produce this much for war, what does peace look like? And more troubling, if everything they were told was a lie, what else might not be true? Little do Hans, Radke, or the other POWs know, the greatest surprises, the true collapse of beliefs, are yet to come. The barbed wire holds their bodies, but America's abundance is about to breach the last fortress, their minds. The weeks after arrival at Camp Hearn unfurl like chapters from a surreal epic. For POWs like Hans Müller and Friedrich Radke, the days are bookended by routines, roll calls, meals of astonishing quality, time spent writing letters, reading, and talking. Yet the shock of abundance, so plain on that first journey, only intensifies as the weeks slip by. It begins on a sweltering September day, when Müller and a group of fellow prisoners are rousted early from the barracks and ordered to dress for work detail. There's murmuring, work, yes, but what kind? The Geneva Convention, as many understand, protects them from forced labor in war industries, but agricultural work falls under permitted labor, especially with so many American men overseas. There's grumbling, but the guards are firm and oddly apologetic. You'll help harvest the cotton. Good for the camp, good for you. And you'll earn scrip for the canteen. As the truck rumbles out of the camp gates, the landscape opens wide, and sun-bleached fields fan away in every direction. For Müller, whose home was a patchwork of carefully tended plots in Bavaria, the sheer size is mind-boggling. Land as flat as the sea, horizon to horizon stitched with neat rows of cotton, corn, wheat, and alfalfa. He tries to count the tractors, shiny, squat, modern. Each one, he thinks, could do the work of a whole village back home. The American farmer awaiting them is Old Man Durham, a jowly, sunburned character with a wide-brimmed hat and a ready smile. He shakes hands with each POW, not as captives, but as fellow men. "You work good," he says. "There's fresh lemonade, big lunch, and maybe a cigarette break or two." The POWs exchange awkward glances. Such a reception is unheard of anywhere in Germany. The day unspools in sweat and dust. Tractors driven by teenage boys and girls slice effortless paths through the fields. Cotton gins on trailers rumble behind, compacting the snowy stalks with impressive efficiency. One of the Americans, a boy barely 17, shows Hans his watch, an American-made Bulova. "I got that for working harvest last year," he boasts. Müller struggles in English, but the pride is obvious. Hans reflects that few working-class Germans would ever dream of such a thing. Lunch is another shock. Sandwiches stacked high with cold cuts, thick slabs of bread, salty chips, and apples. The American workers toss away the crusts and half-eaten fruit with abandon. Hunger is a distant memory here. Waste is commonplace. Friedrich Radke, still a farmer at heart, feels a mix of admiration and anger. How can these people have so much and care so little? Over time, what the POWs experience isn't just material wealth, but the culture of abundance. They see fields left fallow because there is already too much grain to process. On another detail, Hans works at a cannery. He is set to sorting tomatoes and is thunderstruck when barrels of perfectly good fruit, slightly blemished, are tipped aside to rot. The Americans explain, "People here want their food to look perfect." It is a difficult lesson in supply, demand, and the strange logic of plenty. The local townsfolk, too, are nothing like the ogres of Nazi tales. Kids wave from bicycles. Shopkeepers and wives sometimes send cookies, books, or American magazines to the camp. A local church delivers Christmas packages stuffed with sweets, socks, and postcards. The men are invited to concerts and lectures. This, to men convinced that Yankees were spiteful, vengeful monsters. Some prisoners, especially older, more staunchly Nazi men, clash with the new reality. "It's propaganda," spits Unteroffizier Meissner in the mess hall. "They show us the best, hide the rest." But it becomes impossible to maintain the illusion when thousands witness the same scenes. Younger POWs especially begin to doubt, to question what they were told. Hans finds himself asking Bill, the guard, about American elections, unions, the radio shows blaring jazz and swing. The answers are patient, sometimes even proud. "We're not perfect, but everyone can speak their mind, even about the president." There's subtle, sometimes bitter humor. "If this is propaganda, it is the most expensive show I have ever seen," jokes Karl, a POW from Cologne. Others reply, "If only Berlin's theaters had such food and heat." In secret, diaries are filled with sketches, tractors and trucks, canned peaches, machinery and maps of the sprawling fields. Hans begins writing letters to his parents about the scale of these farms, careful not to draw censors, ire, but hinting. Life here is nothing as we were told. The land is wide, the people kind, the food enough for everyone. Friedrich Radke is assigned to a group sent north to Nebraska for the sugar beet harvest. He finds the American Midwest colder but just as astonishing. The local cooperative has automated much of the work: conveyors, graders, machines that wash and sort beets in minutes, not hours. At night, under the glow of electric floodlights, The workers, POWs among them, play chess, swap stories, and even watch boxing matches on the single-town television. Germans and Americans both cursing the cold, both longing for home, Radke writes in his camp journal. By late autumn, Hans Müller experiences his first Thanksgiving. He doesn't know much about the holiday, but the camp mess hall serves an extravagant meal: roasted turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce. The guards, many away from their own families, are no less homesick. There's laughter, even the beginnings of friendships. Music spills from the gramophone. For a brief moment, the war feels thousands of miles away. But not all is idyllic. Some American civilians are mistrustful, sometimes even hostile. Not everyone can stomach the idea of enemy soldiers working alongside their sons and daughters. Disputes arise, but the rules are clear. Geneva Convention rights will be respected, and anyone mistreating POWs faces severe punishment. Over these months, the POWs write home, and often their letters cross in the mail with news from a shattered Germany. Bombed-out cities, missing family members, food lines hours long for scraps of bread. This contrast between their own conditions and those of their loved ones at home deepens the internal conflict for many. For some, guilt takes root, almost shame at surviving in safety while their homeland burns. Radke, a committed patriot but not a Nazi ideologue, finds himself torn. One evening, watching the Texas sun sink over endless fields, he admits to Hans, "They have built something here. Not just machines, but trust and hope." New stories emerge weekly. A young POW named Georg befriends the son of a local farmer. The boy teaches him to pitch hay and drive an old Ford pickup. In return, Georg sketches watercolors of farm life for the family. By Christmas, he is almost like an adopted son, and when news of the Battle of the Bulge hits, Georg is invited in for a special supper. Soon, POWs are allowed, under guard, but with surprising freedom, to visit local fairs, markets, and even attend educational classes offered at the camp. Some begin to learn English in earnest, fascinated by American slang. Hans, who once dismissed democracy as chaos, enters the camp debate club, eager to hear differing ideas. The once proud, unbendable lines of Nazi thought begin to crumble, replaced by tentative curiosity. The biggest revelation, however, is yet to come. For as the fields go fallow and the days shorten, new orders are posted. The next labor assignments will bring many outside the world of agriculture. Into America, Hart, its factories, foundries, and steel mills. If agriculture displayed the nation's bounty, what would its industry reveal? What would happen when men who built tanks and bombs for Hitler meet the machinery of democracy itself? As an icy wind rattles the camp's barbed wire on New Year's Eve, Hans wonders aloud, what will we find next? Friedrich Radke shrugs and stares at the horizon, where the last blaze of American sunset flickers out. Something none of us could ever have imagined. The Texas winter grows cold, but a new sense of anticipation stirs through Camp Hearn. Across the rows of bunks, German conversations have shifted. Fewer men talk of repatriation or victory. Instead, they relive stories of cotton gins, mechanical marvels, and the unexpected generosity of American farmers. Hans Müller finds himself watching the horizon, confused and fascinated. If the fields changed their notions of plenty, what about the factories, where American ingenuity transformed raw metal into world-shaking machines? In early January, the first labor details are assembled for industrial assignments. Some men grumble, remembering forced labor in the Reich. But the rumors are different. Not munitions, the guards emphasize. Only civilian work. We need labor. The men are off fighting. Hans is sent, with a group of 24 POWs, to the outskirts of Houston, where the Clayton foundry is running at full tilt. Before they even pass through the gate, the evidence of scale and power hits him. cranes hoist tons of steel with electric ease. Trains deliver endless carriages of iron ore, and workers, women, men, even older teenagers, move with practiced confidence. Hans is paired with a senior machinist, Mr. Braddock, a short, balding man with calloused hands. He greets Hans with a grin and a firm handshake. "Let's get to it." For Hans, it is pure astonishment. He once apprenticed at a machine shop outside Munich, where hand tools and careful rationing were rule. Here, everything is automated, electrified, doubled and redoubled. He learns to run a lathe that powers through iron rods in minutes, something that would take hours back home. Even more remarkable, mechanical failures are swiftly fixed, spare parts retrieved from well-stocked bins, the work never stopping. Hans asks, "Where are your shortages?" Mr. Braddock laughs. "Shortages? We work around them. If we run out of one thing, we use another." The scale is overwhelming. On the lunch break, Hans eats beside welders, engineers, and dozens of Rosie the Riveters, women clad in coveralls, cheerful and self-assured. They talk to him without fear or pride. One, Betty Lou, tells him, "My husband's in France. I want him to come back, so I keep working." The foreman brings out cream pies and hot stew for everyone. Hans is shocked at the variety and quality. "During the work week, you must eat well," says Betty Lou, patting her belly, "else the steel won't bend to your will." The foundry changes Hans's understanding of industry as surely as Texas changed his understanding of land. Each shift ends with exhaustion, but satisfaction. Each day brings new lessons in English and in American can-do attitude. Hans records the names of machines, sketches diagrams, records methods he never saw in Germany. Meanwhile, back at Camp Hearn, stories fly across the common room like rumors of gold. Friedrich Radke, assigned to a bottling plant, marvels at the mechanized assembly line. Conveyor belts move bottles faster than human hands could ever match. Machines fill, cap, and label thousands a day. He befriends a supervisor, Mr. Harris, who loves baseball and tells Frederick, "Americans like automation. Frees us up for the good things in life, like a ball game and a barbecue." Some POWs, like Unteroffizier Karl Klingemann, are assigned to a tire factory in Akron, Ohio, where synthetic rubber is churned out in quantities surpassing all European hopes. Klingemann writes home, "They make rubber faster than our army makes rifles, and they waste nothing. Their scrap is our treasure." The stories grow more incredible with each week. POWs in Detroit see the legendary Ford Willow Run plant. It is the stuff of myth. A single floor greater than the entire town, pounding out a B-24 bomber every 63 minutes. Hans visits on a supervised tour, jaw-dropping as he follows the endless line of engines, wings, cockpits, and landing gear. Outside, hundreds of finished planes sit like flocks of metal birds, ready to fly. In Chicago, prisoners assigned to meatpacking plants find themselves surrounded by abundance once more. The city's stockyards hum with every sort of livestock, processed with stunning efficiency. A butcher named Levi teaches Hans the American way to slice beef, and the POW marvels at the conveyor belts transporting prime cuts at breakneck speed. "In Germany, this would be a feast for princes," Hans says. Levi shrugs. "Here, it's Tuesday." Electricity is everywhere. Machines run through the night. Lights never dim. Power lines hum across the neighborhoods. The camps themselves are heated and powered throughout even the harshest winter storms. The guards tell stories of the Tennessee Valley Authority and giant dams harnessing more energy than whole German cities consumed in a year. Hans begins to see the pattern. Abundance rooted not in luck, but in power and planning. With each factory and plant, the mental walls built by propaganda continue to crumble. The diversity astounds him. Workers of every background, women in key roles, even Black Americans, treated warmly and with dignity by many, though not all. Some German officers, raised in strict racial hierarchies, are unnerved by this but cannot argue with the results. America throws everyone into the mix, says Mr. Harris, and somehow the machines always run. Education becomes another unexpected pillar. At night, American foremen lend books and pamphlets. Science, politics, novels. Hans starts with dictionaries and books on industrial methods, but soon moves to Steinbeck, Twain, even magazines about political debates. Camp Hearn hosts lectures from traveling educators, sometimes even former German professors. The prisoners are allowed, encouraged even, to read and debate, as if their captors are intent not just on winning the war, but winning minds. Some POWs are skeptical. They want to turn us into Americans, mutters Meissner. They will fail. But over months, it is clear that exposure, not coercion, is the real transformative force. They want us to see. Then let us choose. Through the spring and summer of 1944, the pace of industry quickens with the steady drumbeat of Allied advances in Europe. The men follow the news, piecing together a world changing faster than they predicted. German defeat seems inevitable, but in the American factories, hope is not entirely lost. Dreams of rebuilding, of learning, even of cooperation simmer quietly. One night Hans stands atop an oil drum, looking over the shimmering lights of Houston's refineries. He finds Friedrich there, silent and thoughtful. "We will never be the same men who left Germany," Hans says. Friedrich nods. "No, we know what is possible now. The war is the past. The future, perhaps, will be here, in minds and machines." As the POWs return to Camp Hearn, there is a growing rumor. More lectures will be held, and some will be on American democracy. Hans wonders what further surprises lie in wait, and whether the transformation begun in workshops will finally reach the root, reshaping hearts as surely as it reshaped hands. Part 4. Breaking the Chains. Re-education and the collapse of the old order. By the fall of 1944, a palpable shift moves through the POW camps all across America. For much of that year, Germans like Hans Müller and Friedrich Radke have been drawn beyond the wire, physically, intellectually, and emotionally. They've wielded tools alongside Americans, witnessed abundance, and encountered kindnesses that gnaw away at the stories once fed to them by Nazi propagandists. But now, a new battlefield emerges, a clash not over territory or tanks, but for the very beliefs in their hearts and minds. The first signs are subtle. At Camp Hearn and others like it, notices appear on message boards. Discussion club tonight. Topic: what does democracy mean to you? The camp library, once a modest shelf of German classics, grows thanks to a remarkable and top-secret program by the U.S. military, the Special Projects Division. Not only are American books in translation provided, history, philosophy, news, but newly written German-language newspapers such as Der Ruf, The Call, appear. These are not crude propaganda leaflets, but thoughtful, challenging essays penned by exiled German academics, some formerly persecuted by the Nazis. Hans hesitates at first. Back home, open debate meant danger. But here, in the warmth of a Texas evening, the barbed wire lit by floodlights, he listens as guards encourage, never force, lively debates. How can governments rule justly? What is freedom? What is answered by strength? And what by tolerance? The discussions become electric. Dissidents, once cowed by hardline Nazis in the camps, find their voices. Friedrich is suddenly struck by how dangerous questions are asked aloud. Why did Germany prosecute war? What good is strength without justice? Some of the most staunch Nazis try to bully, but over time their ranks thin as the uncertain grow bold. Education goes beyond politics. Vocational training is offered to hundreds: mechanics, agriculture, radio operation, secretarial skills. Classes are led not just by Americans, but by fellow prisoners, former teachers and university students who adapt their lessons. Hans, who once thought democracy meant chaos, finds himself absorbed in lessons on the U.S. Constitution by a fellow POW named Ludwig, a former law student. His copy of the Federalist Papers, borrowed from the library, soon bristles with slips of paper. Free speech? Even against the president? The answer he gets, especially against the president, sparks laughter and wonder. Not all are convinced. Unteroffizier Meissner speaks for the hardliners. They want us to become Americans, to betray Germany. Some secretly vandalize books or disrupt classes. But by 1944, their grip is weakening. Men see the truth with their own eyes. At night, in the barracks, late-night conversations hum. Hans admits to Friedrich, "Maybe we lost the war the moment we believed in fear instead of possibility." The camp administration is careful. Re-education is not forced, and guards stress that embracing ideas is not a requirement for better treatment. Still, some men do change, sometimes dramatically. A young Rhinelander named Christoph, once fiercely nationalistic, volunteers for every class. "I want to understand why they built such a country," he explains. By Christmas, he can quote Lincoln and debate Jefferson. In 1944, letters from home worsen in their darkness. Destroyed homes, lost loved ones, hunger and despair. Some men, racked with guilt, use education as refuge. Der Ruf expands, running stories of reconciliation and the need for a future Germany based not on conquest, but on rebuilding and democracy. Hans sends home censored but heartfelt letters. "There is more to life than the glory of the Reich. Here I have seen dignity, even for prisoners." It is a message echoed in letters preserved by the Red Cross and attested by historians decades later. The symbolism of American holidays leaves a profound mark. Thanksgiving and Christmas feasts, turkey, pies, enough food to stun anyone who recalls German rationing, become moments for communal thanks and reflections. At a concert on Christmas Eve, a choir of both POWs and Americans sings Stille Nacht to thunderous applause. Tears are common in the hall. Even enemies can be merciful, Friedrich writes in his journal. Perhaps the most powerful moment comes in early 1945, when the German POWs are shown actual footage of the liberation of Nazi concentration camps. American officers are braced for denial, perhaps even riots, but the effect is devastatingly quiet. Hans, Friedrich, and dozens of others watch, pale and silent, as images of starved corpses and haunted survivors roll across the projector screen. Some shout, "Lügen!" lies, but most sit thunderstruck. Later that night, Friedrich sits by the barracks window, head in hands. "Why did no one tell us? How could we become this?" The conversations shift from denial to soul-searching. For many, the last remnants of certainty finally shatter. The war wasn't just lost on the battlefield, but morally, fundamentally, utterly. From this reckoning, something remarkable begins. Groups form to discuss post-war plans, not just for themselves, but for a broken Germany. Some POWs even volunteer to help rebuild, their names put forward by the U.S. military for special programs in post-war Europe. A few are allowed to write essays and even radio broadcasts urging Germans, at war's end, to embrace peace and a new path. The camp guards notice the changes. Disciplinary problems drop. Hardliners grow isolated. The American approach, from overwhelming material abundance to faith in debate and education, has achieved what barbed wire and watchtowers alone never could. The transformation of former enemies not just into friendly laborers, but into possible friends and allies for the future. As the winter of 1944-45 yields to spring, the POWs gather nightly to follow the news. Germany, at last, is crumbling. Hitler's desperate broadcasts begin to seem less like orders, more like the rants of a madman. The men wait, uncertain but no longer afraid. The old world has broken. A new one, they begin to hope, might just rise from the ashes, here, in the shadow of the workshops and classrooms of America. Hans, Friedrich, and scores of others sit late into the last cold nights, mapping in words and dreams the country they hope, someday, somehow, they might help to rebuild. Part 5. The Human Forge. From Captives to Collaborators. The news is everywhere. Germany has surrendered. In the mess halls, in the workshops, above baseball diamonds and vegetable gardens, American and German alike stand transfixed as President Truman's words echo through the loudspeakers at Camp Hearn and thousands of other camps. World War II is finally over. For many American GIs, euphoria mingles with exhaustion. For the German POWs, shock and bewilderment blend with relief, and the ache of longing for home. But the war's end sparks new questions. What now for the prisoners who have labored, learned, and, over endless days and nights, been transformed by their time in the land of abundance? For Hans Müller, Friedrich Radke, and their companions, this is another threshold, no less daunting than the first step off the boat at Norfolk a lifetime before. May 1945 brings an air of anxious hope. Some men, achingly aware of loved ones in the ruins of Dresden, Berlin, or Hamburg, clamor for news and dream only of return. Others, changed by their American experience, begin to see their role as something more, perhaps as bridge builders between two worlds. Camp Hearn's re-education officers, themselves war veterans and scholars, encourage these ambitions. A program begins, quietly at first, to identify POWs who have embraced the promise of democracy and tolerance. The Democrat groups meet after hours, debating how to carry these new ideals back to a shattered homeland. The lessons learned in fields, factories, and barracks become blueprints for rebuilding. Merit, not blood. Equity, not privilege. Cooperation, not tyranny. Hans finds himself acting increasingly as a go-between, translating for new arrivals, helping at the literacy classes, and volunteering at every opportunity to organize cultural events. A far cry from his early sullen weeks, when the world seemed reduced to barbed wire and memories of home. Friedrich writes essays, at first private, then submitted to Der Ruf, on the role of reconciliation. He recalls, in vivid detail, the moment when American guards invited him, still weary and broken, to share in Memorial Day services. They honored their dead, he writes, but also prayed for the day when no such sacrifice would be needed. This memory, which he shares again and again in correspondence, fires a sense of mission. Peace is not just the absence of war, but the forging of understanding. Some men, racked still by guilt, become fervent students of world affairs. Christoph, the young Rhinelander whose transformation began months earlier, pores over post-war plans for Europe. America will lead with industry and ideas, he predicts. But Germany must show we are capable of change. He volunteers for the camp's vocational office, helping prepare detailed lists of skilled men who, he hopes, will be the anchors of the new Germany. Yet these months are not without hardship. There are suicides, men unable to reconcile what they have learned here with horrors at home. There are moments of anger and loss, especially as word of Soviet occupation and retribution filters in. Some older POWs, eyes blank with defeat, barely speak. For most, however, these low moments are countered by flashes of hope. A letter from a long-lost brother, a magazine article about the Marshall Plan, a chorus of POWs and Texans joining voices in a 4th of July folk song. In late summer, the applications to leave for Britain or France, as laborers in Europe's enormous reconstruction effort, pour in by the thousands. Officers from the International Red Cross and the U.S. Army vet the lists. Some of the Democrats are fast-tracked for training, eventually forming the backbone of civil administrations in the coming years. The lessons of American industry, work ethic, creativity, equality, run as deep as any political instruction. Among the most touching stories is that of Otto Becker, an engineer from Hamburg, who helps supervise the camp's radio station. Every week, Otto broadcasts both English and German programs, news from home, popular American jazz, and interviews with POWs about the meaning of liberty. One night, as a thunderstorm shakes the camp, Otto reads a translated passage from Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. "I am large, I contain multitudes. It is," he tells his listeners, Americans and Germans alike, "a vision for a nation and for their future." Cultural exchanges become commonplace. Prisoners participate in art contests, build model bridges and towns, perform Shakespeare, and teach German to local Texans curious about their distant roots. Guards, who at war's height approached prisoners with rifles and suspicion, now speak freely, share photographs, and mourn fallen friends together. Eulogies mix English and German. A chaplain says at one such memorial, "We are all sons of Abraham, fallen and hopeful." As the autumn of 1945 turns to winter, the official program of repatriation accelerates. Some prisoners are heartbroken to leave. Others cannot bear another day of separation from their families. Farewells are not easy. Hans writes his last entry in his English-language journal, "This land broke me and then remade me. I must return, but I leave much here. My fear, my certainty, my old country." Radke, chosen as a spokesperson for his transport, gives a short speech to the guards. "You have given us more than food and safety. You have shown us that even enemies can become neighbors. We will not forget." As thousands pile onto trains bound for ports in New York, Norfolk, and New Orleans, there are hugs, handshakes, promises to write, and wishes for reunions someday in a peaceful world. But the story's final chapter is not parting, but everything the men carry home: the seeds of renewal, the memories of abundance, the habits of questioning, learning, and hope. In the human forge of POW life in America, the shackles that once bound minds have melted away, leaving something much rarer and more precious behind: a genuine desire for peace and cooperation. In the years ahead, historians will look back and see how these months and years in the United States became the classroom and the crucible of a democratic Germany. For Hans, Friedrich, and thousands like them, this is the greatest transformation of all. Have you ever wondered what happened to German soldiers after World War II? We often hear about the battles, but the story doesn't end when the fighting stops. For hundreds of thousands of German prisoners of war, a new, often shocking chapter was just beginning. Today, we're uncovering 5 astonishing realities they faced. First, the sheer scale of the surrender was overwhelming. Imagine millions of soldiers laying down their arms. The Allies weren't prepared for this. Many German POWs spent their first weeks or even months in vast, open-air enclosures, with minimal food, water, or shelter. In places like the Rheinwiesenlager or Rhine Meadow camps, they were exposed to the elements, a stark and immediate shock after the structured life of the army. Second was the denazification process. Prisoners were subjected to intensive re-education programs. They were shown films of the concentration camps, forced to confront the atrocities committed by the regime they fought for. For many, who had been fed a steady diet of propaganda, this was a profoundly jarring and disillusioning experience. It was a psychological battle that began right after the physical one ended. The third shock: the kindness of their former enemies. While conditions could be harsh, many German POWs held in the United States or Britain were surprised by the treatment they received. They worked on farms, were given fair rations, and sometimes even formed friendships with local families. One POW in America later recalled being stunned when a farmer's wife offered him a piece of cake, a simple act of humanity that stood in stark contrast to the brutal war he had just left. Fourth, the stark difference in fates. A German soldier's experience depended entirely on who captured him. Those taken by the Western Allies had a vastly different and generally better experience than those captured by the Soviet Union. Sent to labor camps in Siberia, many faced brutal conditions, starvation, and years of hard labor. The hope of returning home was a distant dream for them, with the last German POWs not returning from the USSR until 1956. The location of their surrender was truly a matter of life and death. Finally, the fifth, and perhaps most profound shock, was returning home. After years in captivity, they came back to a country they barely recognized. Their homes were often destroyed, their cities were in ruins, and their nation was divided. They were men out of time returning to a Stunde Null, or 0 hour, where Germany had to rebuild itself from the ashes. They had to find their place in a new world, carrying the weight of the past while trying to build a future. The experiences of these men are a powerful reminder that the consequences of war extend far beyond the battlefield. It's a complex part of our shared history that continues to teach us about resilience, disillusionment, and the surprising flickers of humanity in the darkest of times. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe for more dives into the untold stories of history. See you next time.